As Barack Obama and Dmitry Medvedev agree to sharp cuts in the most comprehensive arms control treaty in 2 decades, and the standoff between Western countries and Iran continues over its nuclear program, Iran's Arab neighbors in the Gulf consider their own nuclear ambitions and their relationship with Tehran. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Garda. While nuclear giants, the US and Russia, agreed to reduce their stockpiles of weapons, some of the brightest minds in nuclear science have gathered here in Bahrain to discuss the future of nuclear energy in the Gulf and how to avert nuclear catastrophe. Mohammed Shukair has more.
The Gulf Cooperation Council is addressing concerns in the region over Iran's nuclear program and its confrontation with the West. It's becoming clear that Arab Gulf countries see nuclear power as the way ahead, whether they have oil or not. The United Arab Emirates has already reached a deal in December with South Korea to build nuclear power stations. They believe that if you don't start planning for it now, you won't have it when you need it. In this week's conference in Bahrain, the Gulf Cooperation Council proposed a joint strategy for tackling nuclear issues. They want to involve neighboring countries like Iran and Iraq in developing safe nuclear energy programs.
So this conference is not about the Persian or the Arab Gulf. It is not about East and West. It is not about Israel. It is not about sectarian orientation. It is about us and what we want to be and the choices we want to take. To understand this, we would like to start with the choices of the neighborhood's nuclear programs on one side and the Arab nuclear strategy on the other hand, and how the GCC nuclear project fit in that. This is the Gulf dimension.
At this week's conference, top scientists and nuclear experts looked at ways to alleviate Iranian suspicions, while at the same time acknowledging Iran's rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to exploit nuclear power for peaceful reasons. Here in Manama, there is an extended hand for partnership from the Gulf Arab neighbors. It's a question of trust. Will the GCC countries be able to show genuine signs of trust that would bring Iran on board? The benefits are mutual. Iran would gain an end to its long-standing dispute with the Western world, and the GCC would finally have the long-sought peace of mind. Mohammed Shukair for Inside Story, Manama, Bahrain.
Well, joining me now to discuss all of this are our guests, Bruno Pello, the former Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA. Next to him, Maurizio Martellini, Scientific Director at the Center on International Security at the University of Insubria in Como, Italy. And next to him, Helmut Hirsch, Scientific Consultant for Nuclear Safety. Gentlemen, thank you, all of you, for joining us. Great pleasure having you. It's a pleasure having 3 scientists instead of politicians. It's a rarity for us in media. Firstly, Mr. Pello, before we get into the details of what came out of here and the Gulf in general, I want to talk very broadly. The news that came out on Friday, Presidents Obama and Medvedev, despite still both having thousands of nuclear weapons, that agreement, taking that step towards non-proliferation and reducing stockpiles. How significant is that?
It is a very significant step, because otherwise the old agreement would have elapsed and there would have been no disarmament tool between the US and Russia. So it's very significant. It's also significant in terms of timing. Next month in New York, all parties to the Non-Proliferation Treaty will meet in New York. And everybody is expecting some more signal from the weapon states. If the weapon states do nothing towards disarmament, why should all the others continue their effort for non-proliferation?
Mr. Martellini, I see you nodding in agreement. Does it create the right spirit? So, for example, a better atmosphere for negotiating with countries like Iran?
Yes, I agree with my colleague that this is create a momentum that is particularly wanted by the non-nuclear weapon states. Of course, within the NPT regime, there are many dimensions and many states with different capability, technological capability. So it's very important to give this signal. And just to remember to the public, I mean, the Egypt, the head of the non-allied movement, has addressed many times this issue that we need to have a signal. Together, Russia and the US have 95% of the global nuclear stockpile in terms of nuclear weapons.
Helmut Hirsch, step in the right direction?
Well, I think it was a little step. It should also not be overestimated, but it's certainly to be welcomed, and I think it will make things easier in the future for us.
So this conversation is going to expand and contract. I think Iran will forever be a common thread in this conversation. But for the moment, let's just look here at the Gulf and at a lot of what was being discussed here. Bruno Pello, presumably the region has more oil and gas than anybody else until the end of time. Why would anyone want nuclear energy here?
Well, some of the reasons were mentioned during the conference, namely the interest in diversifying the energy supply and getting into other technologies in order to prepare the after oil period. It is fundamentally an economical decision. And some people, yes, wonder why, with so much fossil energy available, with so much sun available also nearby, why go nuclear? I think it's probably a discussion that has to take place in all the Gulf countries. Right. The wish was expressed to have all these countries get together. I think first of all they have to discuss the issue by themselves, each by themselves. Where is our priority? What do we want? Or what do we need besides what we want? That would be a discussion that has to take place. Nuclear is a difficult technology. It's a heavy technology requiring a lot of investment, requiring infrastructure, requiring people. It's not an easy decision which has to be taken lightheartedly.
Helmut Hirsch, it's also a dangerous technology, even if you take the weapons element out of it. I was reading some of your work. You flag up some of the dangers. Run us through some of them.
Yeah, I think, well, one key point is that even with modern nuclear power plants, the generation 3 which are being built now, which are certainly safer than the power plants which are now operating at generation 2, even with those nuclear power plants, accidents are possible which lead to serious radioactive releases. But it's clear that there is a possibility, even if there are very good containment systems, improved containment systems, for instance, there are mechanisms where the containment can fail, leading to releases. There can be mechanisms to bypass the containment. So if we want to live with nuclear power, we always have to live with the hazard of a severe accident with far-reaching consequences. That's a fact.
Of course, I agree. But I would like to connect myself to the remark of Bruno. Indeed, it should be more rational to have for each country in this region, but this is a global, a serious discussion on energy security. I mean, and then decide which are the kind of mixing of energy resource in each country, and then to decide to go to the nuclear. Because nuclear, as Bruno said, is very expensive technology, in particular in the capital cost in the beginning. So you might think some sharing formula. For instance, I mean, if you wanted to build up a nuclear power plant in Jordan has not enough land.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. You say that. I mean, there's already that Abu Dhabi nuclear reactor or reactors are being built in the UAE with some South Korean help. Is there the vision that that could possibly be the hub with sharing with the other nations?
In economy, I mean, my colleague is more expert of me, but from a macroeconomic point of view, I mean, it's cheaper, just to explain, it's cheaper to build up a big power plant of several gigawatt, but then the capital investment is very high, so you can share, like in Europe, we have a liberalization of energy, you have a grid, interstates grid, you can share the energy, the nuclear energy produced by one of these big facility infrastructure for the neighboring country. So you might think also in this way, but this is an economic argument.
Yeah, might I point out another aspect? Of course, it's true there are economies of scale. The larger the power plant, the more economic it will be. But I wanted to come back to the renewables angle. Renewables would be another option here. And there might be the possibility that nuclear power and renewables don't go so well together in the electricity grid in the long run. Similar problems have been observed in Europe, of course, under different conditions. But the basic is that with some forms of renewable energy, solar energy and wind energy, you do not have a constant supply of electricity into the grid. So you need to combine these forms of renewable with power plants which have a good load following capacity, and also nuclear power plants can be operated in a load following manner. They are not technically optimal for it, and it also makes nuclear power more expensive if it's not operated in base load.
Okay, now I want to move on for a bit. I want to bring in Iran now, because this is where we step into political territory inevitably, whether we want to talk about science or not. First and foremost, Bruno Pello, do you think that Iran wants to develop a nuclear weapon?
It's impossible to say. It's impossible to say at this point. The only thing which can be said is that Iran has developed all or most technologies of the fuel cycle at a time when they have no single nuclear power plant in operation. So this has raised some questions. However, it has to be recognized that nuclear energy has started a long time ago in Iran. It started in the early 60s under the Shah. So
it was supported by the West then?
And yes, supported by the West, supported by the US, supported by Germany and France. So they started a huge movement. The Islamic Republic at first stopped, and then they started again. And since that time, there was a continuation of expanding new facilities, which makes sense in an overall picture when there would be enough nuclear power plant to take care of that. The concern about Iran is not so much in what they are doing, whether it's enrichment or reprocessing. The concern is that there has been a tendency to do so in a clandestine way.
Interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because there was a fascinating anecdote that you gave at the conference regarding the succession of missed opportunities between Western powers and Iran.
Yes.
One of them in 2003 regarding the Swiss ambassador. Just take us through that very quickly.
Okay, well, let me finish my sentence on the sense that there has been a lot of facilities. Some of them have been built without being announced before, so that it raised all kind of difficulties. Then came the time for negotiation. Then some countries, the US and European countries, thought maybe we'll have to sit with Iran and see where we stand. And yes, in the period between 2003 and 2006, there were many opportunities where the two parties got very close together to find a solution, to limit enrichment or to find other ways. In 2003, what happened is that the Swiss ambassador in Tehran, his name is Tim Guldiman, has been very active in order to try to bridge the gap between Iran and the West. He happened to be in a very privileged situation because the Swiss embassy in Tehran represents US interests also. So in other words, he is a kind of the US ambassador also. And he had extensive contact with the close family, even, of Ayatollah Khamenei. And together with some Iranian official, he prepared a document which is 2 pages long, a model, a roadmap, as the word has been used abusively in many contexts, a roadmap to start negotiation between Iran and the US. And the point I made today, that that document was transmitted to Washington and was ignored by the Bush administration. If it would have been accepted, at least there would have been a beginning of the conversation.
Well, okay, here's a question, Mr. Martellini. That was the Bush administration. Do you think the same thing had to happen now, the Obama administration would respond positively?
Great question. I wanted to add some element to the analysis. when I explain the Iranian conundrum, nuclear conundrum, to my student, I say, listen, boys, it's like to analyze the security concern of a country just looking the number of centrifuge. I mean, it's very reductive. Indeed, and Bruno knows very well, and in part as an NGO I was involved, I mean, there were also several proposals in the past years from Iran to have small pilot enrichment capabilities. And it has been always refused. So my impression after 7 years, and then I answer, of course, to your question, is that we are in a sort of deficit in confidence. I mean, in the sense that the reaction of the Western community, the international community, to the Iranian proposal and the inverse is not in timing. Answering to your question, no, I think that, good question. I think that there is a basic difference between the Bush administration and the Obama, not in the methodology, because both follow a sort of track two approach, or dual track approach. I mean, carrot and sticks in diplomacy is called. But Obama offered that engagement. However, if you allow me to make this comment, this engagement has been up to now only a declaratory policy.
Right.
The Supreme Guide, or Rabat, Ayatollah Khamenei, said already in 2009 no roots, which are the action showing that the US is changing the attitude. So there is some dysfunctionality between the declaratory policy and the policy in itself.
We're going to come back. I know you're offering a solution to the standoff, but we're going to come back to that in a moment.
No, come on.
Helmut Hirsch, Britain's Foreign Secretary David Miliband wrote an op-ed in the International Herald Tribune Saturday morning. He said, and I'm going to quote this to you, "The nuclear issue cuts to the future of the nuclear non-proliferation regime and the future of the Middle East. Gulf countries would likely join the nuclear bandwagon if Iran goes nuclear. Israel has made it clear that it sees a nuclear Iran as an existential threat and would act, if necessary, in its self-defense. The consequences of both would be devastating." That's Britain's Foreign Secretary, David Miliband. Is he being overly dramatic, or do you share those fears?
I share those fears up to a point, but maybe I'm not sure whether this dramatization is actually helpful now. And I tend to agree with what my colleagues said. I think nobody can really say now whether Iran is wanting to go nuclear in a military sense. My opinion is, and I think we will again agree, that they like to open up the option. But there is no definite evidence or no definite compelling logical reason why they should be working on a military nuclear program now. So I think these are aspects, the effects this can have on the whole region are certainly an aspect which has to be kept in mind. But yeah, as I said, I'm not sure if this was the right way to forward this issue.
Mr. Martellini, you're proposing a solution of sorts.
No, come on. It's not a solution. It's just a proposal. What I am saying is very modest. What I'm saying is that there are continuous signals from Tehran after the end of the Geneva deal, and in this sense I agree with my colleague Bruno. Just to tell you, Obama put some deadline in the end of last year for having some official answer through the agency. And instead, the first answer, not official, but some indication by Tehran that they were ready to accept this nuclear exchange, but in terms based on their terms. Right. The simultaneous exchange in Iranian territory showed that the constituency in the establishment in Tehran taken the strategic decision to, let's say, to consider seriously again the Geneva deal, perhaps in a different version, but the spirit is again a nuclear exchange. Unfortunately, as I said before, this answer there is this dysfunctionality in the time of the answer. So what I suggested as a professor, not anymore, I mean, is that perhaps there are new elements to cook inside of the general idea of this nuclear exchange. I wanted to say something, to clarify something for the public. I mean, this deal is only confidence building measures. Doesn't solve the key issues raised by Bruno, but allow to the international community, to Iran, to have a briefing space for starting a long-term dialogue. So for this reason, since I am, as Italian, living in a chaotic country, I am always optimistic. I think that it's not so negative. There are some signals of reinterest by Iran.
Bruno Pello, as things stand, do you believe the system of negotiation is flawed with the P5+1, those countries who deal with the Iranian issue? Does all of that have to be looked at rather than the details within? Does the entire structure need to be changed?
Yes, I think I'm optimistic on the possibility of negotiation. But then the negotiation framework has to be workable. The P5+1 include the 5 weapon states, and in particular Russia and China, 2 countries which have major economic interests with Iran, and which are not going to support any international action at the Security Council if it would be effective. In other words, here, it's not a real negotiation. You have a concert of 5, 6 people with a German there, but it's not a negotiation. So what can be done?
What is it? Dictation? What is it? How would you characterize it?
It's not dictation, it's a consultation, it's just talking.
Right.
It's just talking without taking decision. The sanction would have to be a little bit tougher. No, they cannot be. China has a business of $100 billion with Iran. You know, you cannot apply sanction to a partner with whom you do such a business. And the Chinese are not very sensitive to non-proliferation. So you need something else. The Iranians want to be recognized as a Middle East country with a long history, to be respected. Right. They would like to negotiate with the US directly and alone. Right. That's their dream. That's their dream to do so. It may come to that. The US could accept that. But then it has to be done. Then you have to redefine the framework. Yeah. My claim also, my proposal also, which was also a proposal by an Iranian in the meeting today who disagreed with my view on Iran, I would like the region to be more actively involved in the negotiation process. It's a Middle East issue. It's an issue between Iran and the Arab countries. How do you organize the work?
It's an issue between Iran and the Arab countries, and one of the things the Arab countries say very often is, why is everybody talking about Iran when Israel has maybe 200 nuclear weapons?
Yes, Israel has 200 nuclear weapons, but Israel is part of the overall Middle East problem. That's why one of the proposals made by an Egyptian representative, we would all like to have a Middle East weapon-free zone. Yeah. This is an objective, but it will not be reached very rapidly. Israel did not sign the non-proliferation treaty. So there is very little that an international organization like the IAEA can do on Israel, because it's outside. This will have to be resolved in a broader Middle East region, but between Iran and the other Middle East countries, the Arabic countries in particular. So I would suggest a strong negotiating movement, thrust by the Gulf countries, together with Egypt, to sit down with Iran and try to find a solution.
Gentlemen, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, listening to the conference and the science behind everything. We have run out of time. We could go on for ages. We could go on for hours. Thank you very much. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on this episode of Inside Story. I enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. If you want to share your comments, your suggestions, or your questions with us, email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From Bahrain, bye-bye.